Look at this stupid car. Now look at the images of these race cars. What do these cars have in common with Spider-Man? Well, suction. Not the suction that might stick Spider-Man to the wall, but a suction due to a downward force created by differences in air pressure. This downward force, which we call downforce, sucks the car into the ground, and these cars, Spider-Man excluded, are abusing a physics principle called ground effect. Well, actually Bernoulli's principle.
So, what is this so-called ground effect, and how would it relate to this long equation?
Well, Bernoulli's principle is the increase in speed of a fluid that is simultaneously occurring with a decrease in pressure. We know that much.
What do you mean?
Well, I'll give you a diagram. Look at this airplane wing. As soon as it is flying, the fluid, air, travels with greater velocity over the wings than under the wings. The greater velocity equals a lower pressure area. A lower velocity equals a higher pressure area under the wings. So when taken off, the difference in pressure will cause the plane to generate lift and climb up. Now look at this. Flip the wing and you essentially have a racing wing that, when traveling with greater velocity, will instead generate a negative lift, where the car gains a downward force, or downforce. It sucks the car to the ground by nature of this principle. Look at this stupid car again. It has the racing wing structure underneath that, by Bernoulli's principle, will now suck that car to the ground. As the lower pressure air enters the underbody of the car and the higher pressure air flows above the underbody, the downforce generated sucks the car to the ground, a so-called ground effect. So ground effect is abusing Bernoulli's principle to generate downforce as air flows through the car, keeping in mind the ground. Okay, so I've explained the physics part. Now Fonzo, future racing engineer, will explain who thought to implement this concept in racing. He will also explain why the other two photos have fans behind them and these things called side skirts.
Well, it was Colin Chapman's team that first implemented the concept of Bernoulli's principle, and later the ground effect with their Lotus cars. Now, the use of it can't really be narrowed down to one person, but the first person ever recorded to think of applying Bernoulli's principle and abuse ground effect dates back to 1928 to a Frenchman named René Prévost. As to how it became popular, well, back to the Lotus F1 team. It was the 70s when the Lotus team first started to investigate the science behind ground effect. As we see with the Lotus 77, they added side skirts to fully take advantage of ground effect, seeing greater downforce with their cars. They continued to see improvement in the performance of their cars, soon winning the Drivers' Championship with Mario Andretti in '78. What about the fans? Not those fans, these fans. Well, the Chaparral 2J walked so the Lotus could run. It used a massive fan to suck itself to the ground by 2 inches, and again, side skirts, abusing ground again, and by and large Bernoulli's. This meant no oversteer during high-speed turns. It generated 2,200 pounds of downforce. It ran for one season until it was unsurprisingly banned. Taking the fan and the Lotus and the concept of ground effect, we come up with the Brabham car.
Okay, so now a fan. Side skirts. The René Prévost underside. Well, it was probably swiftly banned.
Yes, and much later. Abusing ground effect with Formula cars would later get banned too.
So the banning of ground effect, and specifically fan cars and excessive side skirts, was the result of the danger that it proposed. The safety precautions at the time were not enough to prevent accidents from the speeds ground effect gave the cars. Sure, the cars would suck themselves to the ground, but that's also a problem. As the side skirts lose contact from the ground, the car loses suction quickly, leading to an instant loss in downforce and a crash. An end of an era in Formula One racing, but in and outside of Formula One, Bernoulli's principle still applies.
Okay, the racing aspect is cool and all, but obviously it isn't functional for my average Corolla to have a fan on its rear end. How will Bernoulli's principle and ground effect benefit the average driver?
I was going to get to that. The downforce generated through Bernoulli's principle and ground effect can help the average driver in several ways. As the downforce begins to lower the car to the road surface at speeds around 65 km per hour, to 80 kilometers per hour, the downforce helps to keep the fast-moving vehicle and its tires to the surface of the track or the road. The added downward pressure on the tires results in more grip or friction with the road surface, which equates to a car easier to handle. The downforce also lowers the car during speed and its center of gravity, which lowers its pitch and roll risk. Definitely very useful in the highway when, trying to avoid another car. We can demonstrate the benefits of downforce during high speeds using a driving simulator, in this case BeamNG. One of the best ways, I think, to demonstrate the effectiveness of Bernoulli's principle and ground effect is by driving a Formula 1 car upside down a tunnel. As you can see in this video, as soon as the Formula 1 car picks up speed, it begins sucking itself to the wall, and this is because of Bernoulli's principle. So much downforce is being generated as air flows through the Formula 1 car that it almost seems to defy gravity. The car also seemingly just cuts through the wind like it's nothing, and it's like a car on rails. Okay, so that's that for the demonstration. Downforce is pretty cool. Now, why did Fonzo and I end up choosing this topic anyway?
Alexis and I are Formula 1 fans. We are enamored by its meticulous use of physics to satiate that almost innate human desire to ever go faster, further than ever seen before. Bernoulli's principle and ground effect are two concepts that get thrown around in the Formula 1 paddock, so it was easy for us to pick this concept.
He's right, and it even relates to the Physics 30 curriculum, mainly the Newton's Laws unit, Newton's third law. Let me explain. Reinstating Bernoulli's principle, an increase in speed of a fluid occurs simultaneously with a decrease in pressure, a relation to Newton's third law. Newton's third law states that with every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In Bernoulli's principle, a higher speed of a fluid, like air, would have the opposite reaction of a lower pressure area. Inversely, a lower speed means a higher pressure area. And we see this in our wing diagram.